Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Derek Brown. Fellas, this is going to kind of serve as a preview to what our every week Friday show will be in season. We are running it back. Last year, we had a lot of fun. It was truthfully my favorite show of the week that we did all season long. Was kind of our key questions for each matchup going into that upcoming weekend, and it was very kind of relaxed and casual and very conversational, which is fun. And we throw out so much analysis and information throughout the week during the season that it's kind of nice to just have a chat with your boys about some football. So that's what we're going to do for today for a kind of full season preview. And just to let everybody know, due to scheduling with the holiday weekend, this episode is coming out on Labor Day. We are recording this on Thursday before Labor Day weekend. So since it's a few days early, I just wanted to mention that in case there's any kind of breaking news that makes some of this, why did they say that name? Or so-and-so did actually show up for practice. Just wanted to kind of throw that out there that we are recording this a few days early. The Friday show weekly will, of course, be recorded on that day throughout the season. But yeah, we wanted to just kind of give folks a preview of what that show is going to look like this year because we had so much fun with it last year. D-Bro, are you excited about running it back this season?
Oh, of course, man. I said this when we finished up last year. This show in the format was one of my favorite shows every single week to do. After diving into the depths of all the numbers and stuff with the primer every single week, I always felt like when we got together and taped this show, it was just a good palate cleanser. It was a good time to just sit down and just shoot the breeze and talk ball. And that's exactly why I love this show. And I love the format. Just shout out to you, Worm. These questions and with all the stuff we're going to roll through here. And I'm not about puffing you up or blowing smoke in your direction too much. But this is a wonderful outline for today's show.
I believe the last thing you said before we started recording was you can talk less, Worm. So clearly you have no interest in building me up.
No, nothing glamorous that I'm, no lies will be tossed in your direction from me.
No. I mean, I see kind of the main role of a host anyways, asking the best questions we can to get the best answers from you guys. So that's why I really like doing this show too, is kind of coming up with the questions that we want to have answered each week. Fitz, I mean, I know you enjoyed the Friday show as well and are excited to be doing it again this year.
Very. And I am sad, though, that we've already fast forwarded to Monday and the holiday weekend came and gone in the blink of an eye. Too bad. I was really looking forward to that.
I'm really looking forward to the holiday weekend because, as I've mentioned a bunch on my game time reads, I'm going to all three O's games here in Denver this weekend. So I'm going to have a really good time. It's kind of like a last weekend off before the grind of the season hits.
This is going to look terrible when this comes out and the Rockies have just swept the Orioles.
Don't you put that evil on me, okay? The O's have not been playing that great, so you never know. It's theoretically possible. Also, quick shouts to Orioles relief pitcher Danny Coulomb, who hooked me up. He's a listener of the show, so we really appreciate the support. He's currently on the shelf, so we need to get him healthy because the Orioles bullpen is missing him dearly. He reached out and heard that I was going to be going to these games, and he hooked me up with field passes for batting practice for the Friday night game. So shouts to Danny. It was really, really cool of him. It was super awesome, so I wanted to give him a shout out.
Way to go, Danny. Nice.
It's going to be a very fun weekend, and that will be a big part of it.
Fitz is retracting all of his anti-O's.
Yeah, I take that back.
We have listeners on the team. Yeah. So we're going to be doing this show Friday, just so everybody knows, like, as we get into this upcoming week, because, again, this is releasing on Monday. We're going to do kind of like a half-week version of what our normal week will look like for this schedule. We're not going to do, like, the typical waiver stuff, this week, early on in the week. Then after week 1 into week 2 will be kind of our normal weekly schedule for in-season. So next week, the back half of the week will be normal. We're going to do our Thursday start sit show. We're going to do the Friday, key questions show, all that as normal in the back half of the week. So just so everybody knows what to expect here going into week 1. It's always kind of weird. Like, people still have drafts. They're also doing start sit decisions. So that's kind of what it's going to look like. Like I said, this is going to be sort of a preview for our weekly Friday show. We're also going to get into just kind of the guys we really want to plant our flags on. We've been talking all offseason about kind of who our favorite players are. We've talked, this guy's a breakout, this guy's whatever. These are like the guys. We each have 3 names that, like, if we don't come away from these guys in our drafts, we are really disappointed. They're kind of the ones we're going all in on. So we're going to wrap up the show with a little conversation on that. Reminder for everybody, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Also, as we sit here just 1 week away from kickoff, I do want to take one last moment to sort of thank our audience for just being awesome this offseason. You guys have been listening like throughout draft season. It's been really cool to see the support and the interest in the show this season. If you have enjoyed our shows this summer, the best free way to support the show is by leaving an honest review at fantasypros.com/review and rating the show wherever you listen to your podcast. We really, really do appreciate your feedback. And this helps us not only grow the show, but make it better for each and every listener. So thank you again so much. I know that was a much longer intro than usual, so I apologize for that. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. Just want to kind of get some housekeeping out of the way. Let's dive right in. We've got 10 biggest fantasy questions ahead of the season. Question number 1. And I've been bringing up this question as sort of like a skeleton key for the season since like June, I think, on our shows. Can all 3 Texans wide receivers live up to expectations this season? I'm, of course, referring to Nico Collins, Stefon Diggs, and Tank Dell. And if they can't all live up to the hype, who is the right one to target? Fitz, I'll start with you.
I don't think they can all live up to their ADPs. Collectively, they are pretty overpriced. And the one player from this triumvirate I have had the biggest issue with as far as price is Nico Collins. And I think Nico is terrific, but his efficiency was just sky high, probably unrepeatably sky high last year. I mean, he was over 3 yards per route run, which is just an insane number. Then factor in the target pressure with the arrival of Stefon Diggs and, maybe a season of good health with Tank Dell. I mean, like Nico could pay off, but it would probably take an injury for it to happen. That could maybe sort things out a little bit with these 3. Someone gets hurt for a long period of time, but obviously that's not what we want. And I think if all these guys play like 15 or more games, there will be disappointment maybe with all 3 of them. Diggs' price is not that offensive to me. And I got him at 602 in a home league last week. Tank Dell's ECR has him up as like a late 5th rounder. That's a little aggressive for me, but I don't mind him like in the 6th. So, I just feel like these guys are overpriced, and barring injury, it's going to be hard for any of these guys to get the targets they need to return any sort of profit on where they're going in drafts right now.
Yeah, D-Bro, I've kind of approached most of the offseason, most of draft season as saying, I just want the guy who goes 3rd, and that's typically Tank Dell. And, once the other 2 names are off the board, I'll just take the 3rd one because I want to have a piece of this offense, right? You should want to be invested in the Texans offense this season. And so might as well get the one at the cheapest price, especially since Tank Dell is like CJ Stroud's best friend. Having said that, in the last week or so, I have started to just think more and more like, I just think Nico Collins is that good. And like, I just really want the guy who I think is the best receiver paired with CJ Stroud. The cost is like just high enough that it scared me off of actually getting him in a lot of drafts, but I kind of am feeling a little bit of FOMO of not having more Nico Collins, given what we saw last year and given, if CJ Stroud takes any kind of leap over where he entered the NFL from, it's just, all bets are off with this offense. How are you approaching this wide receiver room, D-Bro?
I mean, right now, I'll rewind a little bit. Let me just say that I think all 3 guys can pay off on their cost. If they do, then CJ Stroud's probably going to be a top 3 quarterback. I think that's within the range. Now, is that how I'm usually attacking drafts? No. I'm fine with where Nico Collins goes because, and Fitz, I know that you've discussed not being in on Brandon Ayuk this year for some of the same reasons, but also the volume on top of that. The way that I'll look at Nico Collins, and I'm willing to make the bet on him, is because of that otherworldly efficiency. Like, he is that good. And even if his numbers come down a little bit on a per route basis, I think we get more pass volume infused into this offense this year. So if you were to tell me, okay, what if we got Brandon Ayuk on a high pass rate offense? What could happen? That's the way that I'll look at Nico Collins. And there were certain stretches of last season where he was operating and generating clear alpha level volume when the entire offense kind of condensed around him. So I think that is a reflection of talent and target earning ability. So I'm in line with consensus on Nico. And I think that there is some more meat on the bone with him, considering his talent profile and things like that. But I guess where I push back on it is I have Tank Dell and Stefon Diggs flipped. I think if anybody doesn't pay off on their cost, I think it's going to be Stefon Diggs. And that's one of the big conundrums of the offseason is Stefon Diggs washed? Does he have anything left in the tank? Do we believe the last 2 years of late season fades for him? Which last year, I mean, you want to talk about not just a fade, like the wheels came off, it came to a screeching halt. It was horrible for Stefon Diggs. So we always kind of talk about, okay, we have concerns about wide receivers changing teams in the offseason. Now, like, to me, I feel like we should have even more concerns for the entire, I mean, just the body of work for Stefon Diggs and changing teams. You have, I mean, we don't have to even belabor the point of how much CJ Stroud loves Tank Dell, the rapport he had with both of these receivers last year. If there's a wide receiver that I think has if we want to stack all three of these guys up together and say, okay, we are assuming health for Tank Dell, the guy that I have the most questions about, whether it's age, rapport, his role in the offense, is Stefon Diggs. So I'm willing to draft Nico Collins where he goes and Tank Dell where he goes. And again, I said I have them flip versus consensus. Like Stefon Diggs is low end wide receiver 2, high end 3, and then you have Tank Dell in consensus who's a mid wide receiver 3. I have those guys flipped. So for me in drafts, it's draft Nico or draft Dell, and I'm avoiding Diggs. If it burns me, it burns me. But I think if we're stacking up all of the worries and questions and trying to poke holes in profiles here, Stefon Diggs is the easiest guy to do that with. And I will say also, that not in adjacent to this conversation about the 3 wideouts, if I think that all 3 wideouts can hit, or we're talking about they lead the way in the party for the pass rate for this team, I also think I need to drop Dalton Schultz in ranks just a little bit, because if I'm making the bet that all 3 of those guys pay off or they should go around where they go in drafts, again, somebody's got to lose here, and I think Dalton Schultz needs to be dropped in drafts. So I want to be below consensus on him.
So obviously the question is sort of framed around if these guys are all healthy, right? But I do think it's worth, kind of what you hit on. Like, if one of these guys does get hurt, like, there is added upside with all of them. So to kind of wrap up the Texans conversation, I want to kind of put this question to you guys. If one of them gets hurt, and I don't care which one, just if it ends up that one of them is hurt and the other 2 are healthy, both of those 2 healthy receivers will be top what? Would they be both top, not 10, but would they be both top 20, both top 18? Is it lower? Is it more like both top 25? What kind of range would you put on that, D-Bro?
Top 20. Both would be top 20. Top 20. Yeah, if you were telling me, if we were playing this out and Stefon Diggs wasn't with Houston this year, I think the floor is both of those guys would be top 24. And honestly, second year in a system, second year in the league for Tank Dell, I'd bump it up. Yeah, I think both guys would be top 20.
Same for you, Fitz, top 20?
I'm only willing to go top 30, but I would guess one of them would probably finish top 15.
Okay. Let's go to the next question here, and it's sort of similar. It's an offense that has a lot of exciting pass catchers, possibly, and we'll kind of see which one works out to be the correct one. It's the Packers. Matt LaFleur has said we don't, like the term wide receiver 1. We see as having 4 wide receiver 1s. Fitz, I'll start with you again because you are kind of the Packers guy. But which Packers receivers are the correct ones to draft this year?
Oh, man. So I'm not really in on Jayden Reed, but I'm not really aggrieved by the cost. It's his ECR is wide receiver 37. I think that's kind of where his ADP is too. There were only 2 games in the 18 that he played last year, if you include the Packers playoff games, where he reached a 70% snap share. So he's not on the field in 2 receiver sets. They do really endeavor to get him the ball in 3 receiver sets when he's on the field. I like that. But I don't know. I just don't see a lot of profit potential there. I'm very much in on Christian Watson, who is being drafted as a wide receiver 4. He's got an ECR of wide receiver 41. I just love the touchdown potential. Like, with this many good receivers, and they even go 5 deep with Bo Melton, who's actually sneaky good. I don't know if anyone in this wide receiver core has a 1,200-yard season, but I think Christian Watson could have double-digit touchdowns, and we have seen him score TDs in bunches. He had 8 over a 4-game stretch as a rookie. He had 4 over a 3-game stretch last season. I mean, he is big with a giant wingspan, and he can run by people. So he can be a red zone threat. He can be a home run threat who can take it to the house from pretty much anywhere on the field. So I like him a lot. And I don't mind Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks as a 5th or 6th receiver on my fantasy team. They're both going Doubs ECR is wide receiver 53, Wicks wide receiver 62. I think they're perfectly reasonably priced.
D-Bro, who is the best Packers receiver at cost?
Has been, remains, Christian Watson. You don't have to overthink it. I mean, for me, he was the wide receiver 1 when he was on the field last year. He will be the wide receiver 1 when he's on the field this year. I'm working on the primer right now. I've already made bets for week 1, which if anybody is following my bets on bettingpros.com, I've already made bets for his over receiving yardage line and anytime touchdown. So I think it's Watson, man. And for me, I'm with Pat on I've been avoiding Jayden Reed. I will say his cost has cooled considerably. From where we started at the beginning of the offseason, people have kind of realized he's not a full-time player. And unless the complexion of this offense changes, I don't think it's going to. He's not going to be a full-time player. So fine with where he goes in drafts now as compared to the beginning of the offseason. But for me, it's been easy. I'll draft all the Christian Watson, and if I'm taking a shot late, I'll draft Wicks. That's going to be my 2 highest rostered wide receivers from this passing attack. I mean, all the stuff with Wicks is, yes, I think he is firmly the wide receiver 4 on this team. He's not going to sniff over like a 40% snap share unless there are injuries to this team. But if you want to make a bet on talent, where he goes in drafts, and that's what you're doing. You're making a bet on talent, and that's what we're doing for all of those later round picks. It's if they get opportunity, can they do anything with it? And so for me, it's Watson and Wicks, and I'm just going to avoid the rest of the passing attack. Like Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, they're going to split routes. Don't see the upside there. So, yeah, it's all Watson and Wicks for me.
I feel like most of the conversation has been like, it's kind of like that Jayden Reed versus Christian Watson. And then it's, well, if I don't get one of them, I want to invest in the offense, so I'll take Wicks late. Is Romeo Doubs getting overlooked? I mean, some of the conversation out of camp has been like, their defensive players calling him the best receiver. And, Jordan Love really likes him. Now, Love seems to like all these guys to varying degrees. But, I mean, Romeo Doubs is like going past wide receiver 50. And I don't know. This just seems too low to me, Fitz.
Yeah, I mean, Jair Alexander thinks he's the second best wide receiver in the league behind Devontae Adams. Maybe Jair is being a little bit of a homer there. But, Doubs is
a little bit.
Doubs is pretty good, though. And like he does seem to be a guy Jordan Love really trusts and looks for in like critical third and long situations. So he is maybe being overlooked, and I don't mind him as if I can get him as like my 5th wide receiver, my last wide out on a 16 player team. That's a pretty nice step to have because I think he is flex worthy in just about any week.
D-Bro, I'll start with you on the next question because it's some of your favorite players to talk about. Does the new coaching staff / quarterback room fix everything wrong with Atlanta's skill position players for fantasy?
The short answer here is yes. I think the combination of actually good coaching in the sense of using players that are have the most talent on your roster and using them in advantageous situations and ways. Something Arthur Smith just got too cute and struggled with. I'm sorry, there is no world we should ever live in where Bijan Robinson is out-touched by Tyler Algier in the red zone. That should never exist. So people think that I'm being too hard on Arthur Smith, but when you don't use 2 of your best players in the red zone, i.e. Bijan and Kyle Pitts last year, there are some problems, and you need to take a hard look in the mirror on some of the choices you're making on a weekly basis. So just from that standpoint, yes, I'm all in on Atlanta this year. I think Bijan and Drake London and Kyle Pitts are all appropriately priced in drafts. I think Zach Robinson is going to run a better offense. And I think just from the simple fact of they're going to use their best players. Why did you draft them in the first round, in the NFL draft, at the cost that you incurred? Why did you do that? If you're not going to utilize them, like we can all go back and talk about, the quarterback play. It goes deeper than that. It wasn't just the quarterback play, although that didn't help. It was the usage of a coach getting too cute and saying, I know better than everybody else, and I'm going to prove how smart I am on a weekly basis. I don't think that happens this year. So yes, just by somewhat rational coaching, we've still got to see what Robinson does. I think more rational than Arthur Smith. Yes, I think Atlanta is definitely going to be extremely fruitful for fantasy this year.
Fitz, do you think, the addition of Zach Robinson, Raheem Morris, and also, of course, Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins, does that fix everything? Or are there other any kind of cause for concern for these guys, even with the improvement, in terms of the play caller and the quarterback?
I mean, I'm optimistic because Zach Robinson is a branch from the Sean McVay coaching tree, and the Rams have a pretty good track record as far as getting the ball into the hands of their best players. And what Debro was just saying about Arthur Smith rings so true, and how he would get so imperious when he was defending himself to anyone who dared to question why he is running reverses to Kadarius Hodge and Scotty Miller and giving Cole Pruitt targets when he's got Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts. So, yeah, I mean, no more pulling Bijan from the red zone. Let's just see Bijan, London, and Pitts get the touches and targets they deserve. And I don't know about Cousins. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Michael Penix make starts this year, either due to injury or maybe on the merits. So we'll see. I've never been as much of a Kirk Cousins fan.
I will say on that point, Fitzy, I think them being willing to trade away Heineke says a lot about either their faith in Cousins or their faith in Penix or just that room in general. So definitely feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Are there any of these guys that you're avoiding in terms of kind of like the big three amongst the skill position players? I think we all really like Bijan this year. I mean, everybody does. We're not going out on a limb. Debro, you've obviously really planted your flag on Drake London all summer long. Kyle Pitts is probably the one that people are least interested in. I mean, he's going a few rounds later than these other guys. But at the same time, another year removed from that MCL stuff, all he needs is just a capable quarterback, we think, to be. I mean, he's younger than some of the first round picks in this year's class, and just was this generationally athletic tight end prospect. So, is there anybody that you would make a case against, Debro?
None of the top three. I love every one of them. I'm at or above consensus on them. I'm drafting all the top three. They'll be amongst my highest exposures as far as players throughout best ball and redraft and everywhere. I think the only player that I think I'm probably at market, maybe a little bit below on, is Darnell Mooney. And this really isn't so much Darnell Mooney hate. It's just we saw his metrics kind of tank last year. We can all talk about, the kind of complexion of the Bears offense and stuff, but I think he's going to be a role player. I think he's going to stretch the field. He's just in a long bucket of guys where I'm okay, what's their upside? Do I ever see them cracking a starting lineup or being in my flex spot? And I just have a harder case to make for Darnell Mooney than a lot of other players in that range. So, no, I'm firmly drafting all the top three. No problems being above consensus or at consensus on every single one of them. But if there's somebody from that offense that I'm willing to avoid in drafts, it's Mooney.
Fitz, you fading anybody here?
I don't think I really am. I haven't gotten as much Kyle Pitts as I have in years past, which seems like it's going to backfire. I've had him when he's been this disappointment. It's only because I think George Kittle is a slightly better bet, and it seems like Pitts always goes ahead of Kittle in most drafts. And a lot of times for me, that's that's my alarm to take Kittle with my next pick after Kyle Pitts is drafted. But no, I'm not really concerned about any of these guys popping. London has gotten a little expensive as an early second round pick. I'm not entirely comfortable with him at that price, but I think he's going to have a good year.
Yeah, I also have not gotten as much Pitts as you would think based on how much I like him this year. I've been really strongly of the opinion that I just want one of the top 7 tight ends. And I've ended up getting guys like McBride and Kincaid at what I consider to be values ahead of having to wait to the point where I would take Pitts or Kittle, who I kind of see as the back end of that top 7. So I really like Pitts. And if the other 6 guys go and I'm on the clock, I will be more than happy to take him. It just hasn't really come to that in a lot of my drafts yet. I've just been going earlier on tight end, I guess, than I historically do. But I do really like Pitts. Even if the number of shares I have of him in my leagues might not reflect that, I mean, maybe it's like the Office meme of, no doubt about it, I'm ready to get hurt again, but I am ready to get hurt again with Kyle Pitts. This will be the last year. I can promise you that. If I get burned by Kyle Pitts this year, I will never draft him again. I don't care if he's available in round 16. But
can we talk to production? Can I Slack them right now so we can get that clipped? I just want to throw that out there.
You are welcome to do that if you'd like, for sure. All right, let's go to question 4. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, is it possible that we're not just underrating him in fantasy, but also maybe even Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, despite the fact that they're already first-round picks? I mean, the Jets are the only team with 2 players who are going in the top 10 in ADP, and yet I think it's possible that they might actually even be a little undervalued. If Rodgers is healthy, like, I don't see what's stopping Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson from being like top 5 picks next year consensus, and Breece Hall is already in that range. I just think like the only hesitation for me on the Jets is, well, what if Rodgers isn't all the way healthy? 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear, maybe distracted going into the season, whatever. If he's healthy and like any kind of reasonable facsimile for what Aaron Rodgers that we know and, have watched for so long, I just don't see any way that like Garrett Wilson isn't a tier 1 receiver and that Breece Hall isn't like very much challenging for RB1 this year. Fitz, what do you think? Are we maybe underrating these guys if Rodgers stays healthy and Rodgers himself in fantasy?
I don't think we're overrating Hall or Wilson. I feel like the presumption of good health for Rodgers is sort of baked into the price for Hall and Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing with Rodgers. The Jets offense is going to operate at a really slow pace. That's always how it is with Aaron Rodgers, how it was with the Packers when Rodgers was the quarterback and Nathaniel Hackett was calling the plays. They were always bottom 3, basically, in average seconds between snaps. And the Jets are also going to have one of the best defenses in the league this year. So I don't think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers involved in a lot of shootouts. So I don't worry about any of that for Hall, who's going to get plenty of touches. I don't really worry about it for Wilson because I think he's going to command a massive target share for the Jets. But I really have no interest in drafting Rodgers in fantasy.
Debro, what do you think?
I'm just going to echo what Fitz said. I think they're both appropriately priced. I mean, Garrett Wilson, I mean, we want to talk about too much projection with Drake London and stuff like that. We could say the same thing, I feel like, for Garrett Wilson because we haven't seen him pay off on that top 3, top 5 kind of cost. And we know the upside is there, but it's still a projection. But I have no problem with where he goes because I think he's in the range of right now. I mean, in per consensus, the other players in his tier, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Marvin Harrison Jr., that's appropriately priced with everybody that's around him, considering all those guys have top 3 upside. If they take full command as the wide receiver 1, if their offenses do what we think they can do, if Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie does what we think he can do, then I think that he's appropriately priced. Same thing for Breece. And to Fitz's point, I mean, he hit the nail on the head here. Like, the pairing of Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett has always produced a slow-paced offense, and it's really just relying on efficiency. I think if anything, if we wanted to make some kind of case out of where they go in ADP, I could make you a better case that not necessarily Breece, but Garrett Wilson might be a little bit overrated versus underrated, just based off of the pace of the offense and even perceived touchdown upside. Like, if the offense doesn't move fast, Garrett Wilson is a very, very good route runner, very good separator, very good wide receiver. But does he have the red zone prowess? Does he have the size and the skill set to where, okay, fine, like we kind of project like 6 to 8 touchdowns. Can he get double digits? Can he get 12? Could he get 14? Because to say he's underrated and he should be really like, he's got top 3 upside, he has to get double digit touchdowns. That has to happen for him to reach that type of rarefied air for wide receivers. And if anything, I'd have more questions about can he get that high in touchdowns than I would saying he's underrated.
I think that's a fair question on the touchdowns. I'm like, if you guarantee me health for 17 games for Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, like, it's just hard for me to imagine him not being more of a tier 1 receiver than he is a tier 2. And I feel more confidently about that than I do, A.J. Brown maybe, because, like, there's no Devontae Smith in this offense, at least that I can see in this receiving core. Like, it is Garrett Wilson, and then when they run the ball, obviously it's Breece Hall. But, like, I just think Rodgers is going to lock in on Wilson as the clear best guy in this offense. And, again, if Rodgers is healthy and reasonably efficient, like, it doesn't maybe it matters in terms of Rodgers' fantasy ranking, but in terms of Garrett Wilson, like, I just have zero doubts that if they're both healthy, like, I mean, his floor has been pretty high with Zach Wilson as his quarterback, and like the dregs of that quarterback room, they have been so bad. and he's not been like in this amazing elite receiver, but the floor hasn't entirely bottomed out on Garrett Wilson because I just think he's that good that he can be a capable wide receiver with anybody. If you give him Aaron Rodgers, if Rodgers is quote unquote back, like I just don't see any way he's not in tier 1 this season. On the Rodgers point quickly, Fitz, before I move on, so would you be okay with him as your QB2, or would you rather he be your QB3 in a super flex?
QB3, I think I have him at like quarterback 25 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Consensus has him consensus has him actually at QB20. So he's definitely in the top 24 QB2 range. Some of these guys behind him in ECR, I would definitely disagree with. Like Geno Smith is behind him. I think that's wrong. I think Geno should be higher than Rodgers for sure. But yeah, he's in that, like, it goes from QB 17 to QB 24. Cousins, Herbert, Stafford, Rodgers, Deshaun, Geno, Baker, Levis. That's kind of the range that he's in. He's sitting there at QB 20. A quick note for everybody: if you're juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling overwhelmed, Fantasy Pros will help you simplify things. With Fantasy Pros' multi-league assistant, you can see the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all your teams. It's all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all your leagues with the multi-league assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. All right, let's go to question 5 here. Debra, I'll start with you. What does the addition of Kellen Moore plus the loss of Jason Kelce mean for the Eagles offense in fantasy?
I think the loss of Jason Kelce is going to impact the offensive line, but I think we're talking about top 3, top 2 best offensive line in the NFL versus they're still going to be top 10. So I think it's going to be a small drop off, but I don't think it's earth shattering in the sense of like, if we get, league average good play from the center position for Philly this year, I don't think it's as detrimental as maybe we're all kind of cooking it up to be, and especially from like the goal line stuff. I mean, the thing with the goal line stuff with Jalen Hurts is that was always going to regress. Like you're talking about him and Josh Allen setting records for rushing touchdowns for quarterbacks last year. So expecting any of that to be replicable is probably a fool's errand. But I think looking at this offense overall, this is why, with the addition of Kellen Moore, this is why Jalen Hurts is my QB1 overall. I think we see for the first time ever with Jalen Hurts under center an offense that's not only fast-paced, because that's Kellen Moore's, that's his hallmark. They're going to run a crap ton of plays. I think that fully happens this year. The thing that I think happens in Philly this year that we have never seen before, ever, with Jalen Hurts under center. We have never seen a Philadelphia Eagles offense that has not only been fast as far as play volume, we've never seen an iteration of this offense that's been top 5, top 10, top 12 in neutral passing rate. Much less, we've never seen this offense throw a lot in the red zone. And I'm not even talking about, they don't even have to be top 5, top 10 as far as passing rates in the red zone, but I think they can be. Dude, Kellen Moore has always thrown a bunch in the red zone. I think we get a fully unlocked Philadelphia Eagles passing attack this year that could send Jalen Hurts being the difference maker quarterback this year, and it's not Josh Allen. If it's not Patrick Mahomes throwing for 50 freaking touchdowns, I think it's going to be Jalen Hurts throwing for 30 touchdowns, setting a new career high, setting a new high in passing yardage this year, and still running it in 7 to 10 times at the goal line. So for all these reasons and why I think this offense is changing, I think Philadelphia has a really good shot to be the offense that you really want, specifically with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and the pass game weapons.
I've gone the other way on this for most of this offseason, where I've been kind of fading Hurts relative to the other tier 1 guys. Like, I'm not saying he's tier 3 or outside the top 10 or anything ridiculous like that, but I've been definitely skewing more towards the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, sometimes even like the Anthony Richardsons of the world, and less so with Hurts. So I've kind of gone another direction. Fitz, how are you approaching this offense given all the changes?
I've also been fading Hurts. I don't know if the tush push survives with Jason Kelce gone and Saquon Barkley now an option to give the ball to when you're inside the 3-yard line. Maybe it will survive, but I do think Hurts' streak of 3 straight years with double-digit touchdown runs is in jeopardy this year. So that's part of it, and I didn't like the overall slippage in his offensive passing efficiency last year. after Shane Steichen's departure. As for Kellen Moore, it's been kind of hard to pigeonhole him as a play caller. Like, his tendencies with the Chargers were not entirely the same as his tendencies with the Cowboys, and that's a good thing. He's adaptable. So I don't know if I'm ready to go where Debro is in predicting like a higher, like a top 10 or thinking there's a shot at a top 10 neutral passing rate or red zone passing rate. I think there's a chance. I'm just not like supremely confident in it, but I am supremely confident, as is Debro, that we're going to see a brisk pace, because only Shane Steichen's Colts averaged fewer seconds between offensive plays last year than Kellen Moore's Chargers. So yeah, like, we like that. And, Kellen Moore likes motion. He likes play action. I think we're going to see some of that too. And so, I think it's going to be a better offense than it was last year.
So Fitz, if we're fading Hurts, do you think that maybe then we're underrating Saquon? I think the offense is going to be good enough that there will be touchdowns to be scored. So if we think Hurts is now not getting those, doesn't have the tush push, they spent money on Saquon to bring him in, and I still think Saquon's super talented. Like, maybe the pass catching upside isn't the same, just being paired with a mobile quarterback, but I feel like maybe we could be undervaluing the number of touchdowns Saquon gets this year.
I just think, based on the collective ADPs of Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith, we're expecting this offense to be awesome. I'm not entirely sure it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be good. I don't know if it's going to be awesome or not.
Debro, let's go to you for question 6. Is Caleb Williams good enough as a rookie to support 3 viable starting fantasy wide receivers? And if not, who among those 3, and that's DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Romeo Doubs, is the odd man out? And the reason I wanted to start with you for this question, Debro, is that during draft season, you were fading Caleb Williams relative to consensus. And I'm not going to joke around and say that you hated him, because I know that's what everybody was saying in the comments and stuff. But you were lower on him than just about everybody else was, even if you didn't hate the guy. So do you think he can be good enough as a rookie based on what you've seen in the preseason, based on, just everything you've researched, from during draft season through the summer, all of that, to support these 3 receivers that everybody is to varying degrees excited about?
I think he can. I think there's a path for him to be good enough. Now, this is very much a very similar conversation as we just had about the Houston Texans wide receivers. Do we think all 3 of these guys pay off on their current draft costs? If we do, then we're probably too low on Caleb Williams. Is there a path for that? Yes, there's a path for that, but I honestly am more on I'm more willing to punch my ticket and get on the train that I think there's only 2 wide receivers that really pay off this year, considering where they go. I think DJ Moore is one of them. I think the other is actually Romeo Doubs, and it's not Keenan Allen. I have worries about what Shane Waldron is going to do with this offense and how he's going to deploy Keenan Allen. Is Keenan Allen going to play the outside when they're in 12 personnel, when they're only got 2 wide receivers on the field? Is he going to play the outside for the entirety of the season? And we've talked about this in multiple different shows throughout the offseason, but I'm going to bring it up here. The way he used JSN last year was beyond egregious. You're nerfing a guy with that type of skill set and talent into a low ADOT screen merchant role. And you could say, okay, was that because of the offensive line? Was that because of that's how Shane Waldron wants to run his offense? If we're parsing through player archetypes, in this room, who is the closest guy to the JSN archetype? It's easily Keenan Allen. And this is not to say it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but we know that they're going to use a lot of 12 personnel. They're already doing it where Cole Kmet is a terrible pick where he goes and drafts. I'm full of void. He's already splitting snaps and routes with Gerald Everett. So this is the Shane Waldron effect. So if we see other carryovers from that team, I've got my biggest concerns about Keenan Allen, but that's, again, why Romeo Doubs has been one of my most drafted players the entire offseason. I think Caleb can be really, really good. I just don't know if he can be good enough to support 3 top 36 wide receivers, and especially in the context of what Shane Waldron likes to do.
It's really hard for rookie quarterbacks to support multiple, very high-level pass catchers. It just doesn't happen very often. There are exceptions, and Caleb was seen by many as the best quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence, and one of these elite, different types of players who, that you kind of throw out the rule book for. I've been also kind of fading Keenan Allen. Like, of the three, he's the one I have the least of by far. It scares me a little, honestly. I mean, he had the second most fantasy points of his career in half PPR last season, most since 2017. Like, he was good even though he's gotten older. It's just fun to make the case for DJ Moore's really good, and now he's playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with. And it's fun to make the case for Romeo Doubs was basically neck and neck with Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. As a prospect, and he gets paired with this rookie that you're coming into the NFL with. Those guys often make connections together. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell just a year ago. So it's really fun to make the cases for the other guys. Keenan Allen's really easy to make the case against, but he was really good last year still too. Fitz, I'm curious what you think about not only Caleb Williams' ability to support multiple guys, but if you are fading one, if Allen is the right choice there.
First of all, just to set the record straight, Debro is a full-fledged Caleb Williams hater. He has told me privately that he thinks Caleb is a poor man's Rex Grossman. So, Chicago Bears fans, send your Debro hate mail to FantasyPros, care of. Anyway, so
this is from a Packers fan, okay? So consider the source. Consider the source.
Debro, you'll appreciate this. For a half second, I thought Fitz was going to say, I heard Debro call him and then spew out all the lines that Chris Evans says in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, geez, yeah.
When Ryan Reynolds throws him under the bus. By the way, spoilers.
This is professional gaslighting at its best. I just got to throw that out here.
I do feel pretty confident that DJ Moore is going to get his, and I'm okay with where he's being drafted around wide receiver 20. Not as certain about Keenan Allen and Romeo Doubs. We know there are going to be bumpy spots for Caleb as a passer, as a rookie. It always happens. There are going to be bad games. He's going to have clunkers. And, Rome is the tough one for me because I do think he is a star in the making. And eventually, he is going to shine and be a guy we're drafting in the top 10 at wide receiver every year. But, this could be a 50-catch, 700-yard season for him where he is on the start-sit bubble every week, and it's not comfortable if you have him on your fantasy roster. And maybe Keenan Allen winds up on that bubble too. So I'm not as sure about those guys. And, what Debro has said about Keenan Allen sort of fitting that JSN role for Shane Waldron has crossed my mind too, and it's kind of a scary thought.
It's frightening, man. It's absolutely frightening.
Let's go to question 7, and this one I'm going to hit a couple of different teams so we can go a little quicker on each team, but I just want to kind of ask, is there a correct answer in any of these ambiguous backfields? So the first one is Tennessee. Debro, is there a correct answer in the Tennessee backfield?
Tony Pollard. I think it's Tony Pollard. And this is not because I don't believe in Tajay Spears or I'm just trying to double down on last year's take.
I was going to say, RB1.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is what it comes down to. I think the addition of Tony Pollard told us a lot about how Tennessee views Tajay Spears. They said, okay, and hearkening back to all the pre-draft stuff with the knee and things like that, I think they want to keep him in a managed workload situation where he gets 8 to 12 touches per game. And for me, that leads me back to Tony Pollard and saying, okay, is he probably the favorite for red zone work? Probably. Is he the favorite for early down work? Yep. And we want to say, okay, with how we're attacking all three of these backfields, who is the guy not only, if both of them are going to get equal work, but if one of them were to go down, who is the guy that could take over the backfield and then vaults from being an RB3, low-end RB2 to being an RB1? I think that you can make that case pretty easy for Tony Pollard, but I think it's harder to make that case for Tajay Spears. I think if Tony Pollard were to go down, you'd probably see Tajay, maybe like the volume is a slight uptick. I still think he would be a running back, considering, again, taking the information from the offseason and the addition to Tony Pollard. We might not see Tajay's role change all that much if Pollard were to miss time. So for me, if I'm going to take not only the standalone value, but the upside case I'll take Pollard.
Fitz, is there a correct answer in Tennessee?
Coaches are not always straight with us, but Brian Callahan has said that he views Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears as interchangeable and that he doesn't view either one as a starter. I do think Pollard's going to start, but it sounds like Callahan thinks he could, just totally flip-flop these guys on early downs, on passing downs. I've got it reflected that way in my rankings. I've Pollard RB29 and Spears RB30. And considering that the gap between them is usually much more significant in drafts, I think Spears is the better value. I mean, Spears was electric when he was on the field last year.
He was awesome last year.
Like, there was a crackle of electricity when that dude had the ball in his hands in the open field. Mm-hmm. Like, he is really good, and maybe with this knee thing, he has a Jay Ajayi type career. I think Ajayi had the same thing with, like, no cartilage or no ACL in one of his knees. But Ajayi did have one really spectacular year before his career started to fizzle, and maybe we get that from Tajay.
Pollard is somebody that I've tried to be above consensus on throughout draft season. I like guys who are, again, another year removed from that major injury, and I'm willing to sort of buy the dip on Tony Pollard for sure. Next backfield, Pittsburgh. Fitz, I'll start with you this time. Is there a correct answer in the Pittsburgh backfield?
I'm not especially interested in Najee and only mildly interested in Jaylen Warren. Like, Warren is good. I want to be in on him. I'm wary of investing in Arthur Smith backfield because weekly usage and volatility is just sort of inevitable.
D-Bro?
I think now the problem is with discussing this backfield right now, Jaylen Warren's not 100%. Now, he's supposed to play week 1. Where's his hamstring at? Actually, we shall see. I think from a talent perspective, this is Jaylen Warren for me because it's not only the raw talent, the tackle breaking ability, again, you want to talk about, Fitz talked about the electricity every time Tajay got the ball last year. add some more on top of that for Jaylen Warren. He was, amongst the best in every single metric you can pull up on a per snap basis. And I think in a vacuum, I would say Jaylen Warren. But I will say I do have a lot more concerns about this offense and the offensive line and how this offense is going to run this year after watching them in the preseason. And yes, we could talk about Russell Wilson. We could talk about Justin Fields here. That offensive line did not look good. Maybe that gels as we go through the season. I think they have a lot of talented players and invested draft capital into the offensive line. But sometimes we do see rookie offensive linemen kind of stumble out the gate and sometimes have bad rookie seasons. So I definitely have a lot more questions about this offense than when we entered the offseason after watching it in the preseason. So my answer is Warren, but I will say I am shying away from both of these backs a little bit more in more recent drafts.
Fitz, how about Dallas?
And by the way, just to tack on Isaac Seumalo, I believe he just got hurt for the Steelers too. So an already worrisome offensive line. Yeah, not good. I have actually found myself drafting Zeke a few times. And I feel he is at least going to catch a lot of passes and is probably going to be the goal line guy. Like, I'm certainly not expecting the vintage Zeke 1,800-yard, 15-touchdown season, but I do feel there's a likelihood he gets the majority of the high-value touches in this offense, which is to say pass receptions and carries at the goal line. And, I kind of feel like he is going to be the best bet to get the majority of those for the Cowboys. So I'm willing to draft him considering he has an RB4 price tag right now.
D-Bro?
It's Rico Dowdle for me. I want no part of Zeke.
Still.
And now Dalvin Cook. Like, I don't want any part of either one of them in drafts. The Dalvin Cook signing, is curious to say the least, but I think, look, come on, and I know it's very, very different. I'm not saying that Rico Dowdle or Breece Hall are anywhere even remotely in the same talent area code, but we've seen what Dalvin Cook has offered over the last few years. His efficiency's been declining, and even after the Jets jettisoned him, it wasn't like teams were lining up and falling over each other to sign Dalvin Cook. And so for me, that tells me a lot more of where Dalvin Cook is at in his career. And especially considering the woes of this backfield, or, we're looking at the depth chart and saying somebody's going to step up, right? And then Dallas, the big move they make is bringing Zeke back. I didn't hear Dalvin Cook in that conversation earlier in the offseason when it was like, oh, who could they add to the backfield? Because they swung and a miss and Jerry pulled Jerry things in the NFL draft. And anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But it's still Rico Dowdle for me. I think looking at, you take the name cachet away from Zeke and Dalvin, and look at where they are in their careers, I think that Rico is just the superior talent.
Next question. We are really, really high on this rookie class. In general, it was a class we're all very excited about in Dynasty and rookie drafts. It was a class D-Bro was excited about, when doing the draft show earlier in the year. So we're quite high on the class, but sometimes it doesn't always work out in year one. So which first-year players are actually poised to disappoint this season, Fitz?
I've never known exactly what to make of Xavier Legette. Interesting one-year wonder in college, really this physical marvel, but, he seems like he's behind Jonathan Mingo right now. And you'd think like the Carolina regime would be sort of wanting to push Legette since he's their guy and Mingo was drafted by the previous regime. Ricky Pearsall probably doesn't pop in year one. Probably neither the New England wide receivers with just how bad that offense is going to be. So that's Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Adonai Mitchell, I don't know if the Colts are going to throw enough this year for him to be fantasy viable. I like Ben Sinnott, and I know Debro does too, but I'm kind of expecting a 2025 ETA for him. I think it's going to be probably still some Zach Ertz, at least early this season. And I'm not that optimistic about either Trey Benson or Jalen Wright. I still don't know if Benson is good. I'm just not, I don't know. I'm agnostic right now there. And Jalen Wright, I just think he is at best, the third best running back on the Miami roster. And it would take an injury to either Achane or Mostert, which we could very well get, for him to be fantasy relevant. But even then, still, he is right now, I think, behind Jeff Wilson on the depth chart. So I think it would take a lot for Jalen Wright to pay off for people this year.
Debro, what do you think?
I think the easy name here is Ricky Pearsall, just because we're still kind of up in the air. I was double checking this even before I answered this question. At the time of recording this, Brandon Ayuk is still not at practice. He is still not signed. If Ayuk returns and he plays, then I think Pearsall is going to be on the outside looking in, as well as being injured in camp. You got to get reps. You got to get time to learn the playbook, get integrated and stuff. So I think Pearsall is the guy because he was always kind of the upside bet on this class with the draft capital and then the uncertainty of what happens to Ayuk, what happens to Debo, things like that. So I think he's the guy that could be on the outside looking in. I'll agree with Fitzy on Legette. Right now in the preseason, he's running behind Jonathan Mingo. I think he can hop him during the season. But then it kind of comes down to what's his spot in the pecking order of this passing attack and how many weapons, if any, can Bryce Young support? Because we still got big questions there. So those are the easy guys. One that I'll say that there was a lot of hype for early in best ball season and things like that for that I think is considerably cooled a little bit, and I'm going to throw more cold water on it, is Ladd McConkey. I just don't know how much passing volume we get. And looking at his player archetype, he's a guy, if he's not used down the field, what are we talking about here? He's probably going to end up, it would not surprise me if you're going to tell me that Ladd McConkey ends up with a very JSN type rookie season where he shows something, but the target volume is not there. And this is not even drawing a one-to-one comparison, really awesome players around him. But if he's not going to play in two wide sets, if he has more of low A dot looks and he's not stretching the field, and we have passing volume concerns in this offense, then what are we looking at for McConkey? Okay, fine. If he gets 100 targets and he catches 70 of them, but he only has 10 yards per reception, you're talking about a 70 catch, 700 receiving yard season, and you're saying, geez, why was I over the moon for this guy? So I think those are the easy players to have questions on entering the season.
NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking a player to score a touchdown. It all kicks off Thursday night with my Ravens taking on the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs in Kansas City, with the Chiefs laying a field goal at home. The Ravens are looking for revenge after getting upset in Baltimore last January. It still hurts my heart to think about that one. 2 of the 3 best quarterbacks in football squaring off with a total of 46.5 at DraftKings. Obviously, you'll all be watching this amazing season opener, but are you planning to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends September 19th. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys. Question number 9. Every Fantasy Pros staff analyst has a different tight end one in their rankings. Who is right? Obviously, you guys are going to make the case for your own players here, but Erickson has Mark Andrews. There's basically one person has Andrews, one person has Laporta, one person has McBride, and one person has Travis Kelce. So, D-Bro, who are you making the case for?
It's the right answer has been and continues to be Trey McBride. I mean, come on, guys. When he was the starter last year, he basically led all tight ends in everything, including fantasy points per game. Like, put those numbers over the full season, and we're talking about another step forward this year over a full season and Marvin Harrison Jr. in that offense. It's McBride. Come on.
So D-Bro has McBride, but I was pulling up because I wanted to not assign the wrong player to the wrong people. Erickson does have Mark Andrews. Joey P has Travis Kelce, and Fitz has, of course,
Sammy Ballgame. Sam Laporta, who was the tight end 1 as a rookie last year, defying the don't draft rookie tight end paradigm. So Laporta's my guy, but I could make a case for Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, finishing tight end 1, and I wouldn't be shocked if we saw it as Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, or even Kyle Pitts. I think any of those guys are in the running for tight end 1.
That is tier 1 is Laporta, Kelce, Andrews, and McBride in that order. I'm not listed amongst the staff rankers, but I do have my own rankings, and I do actually have McBride, so I'm with you, D-Bro, on this one. It feels weird to not have Laporta 1 because he is just so like the consensus 1 in most places that you look. He's consensus, in our own ECR for sure. But yeah, I love everything about McBride this year. Like, I love the situation. I love that they added Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't care if that takes away from the targets because there aren't enough other people that scare me in this offense. Like, I think that just helps take some of the defensive attention off him. I think McBride's just really, really good. I think Kyler Murray is going to be great this year. Like, one of my absolute favorite things to do in any draft is, load up on running backs and wide receivers in the first 4 rounds. And then if possible, 5 and 6, just get McBride and Kyler and pair them together is like one of my favorite builds I'm doing this year. And I really like McBride. So I have Laporta too. And by the way, Laporta is number 1 in our consensus rankings. Like I mentioned, he is number 2 for everybody besides Fitz, who has him 1. So some of the other guys, like somebody has him 1, somebody has him 4. It's kind of, a bit of a disparity. Laporta is top 2 for everyone. So that's why he's number 1 in our overall rankings, even though Fitz is the only guy.
I just want to add one little thing on Sammy Ballgame. The only reason I don't have him tight end 1 has nothing to do with the talent and has everything to do with the target upside. Like, I think he can get to 120, 130 targets. Where I think the difference for me, and this is why I have McBride, I think McBride could get to like the high 140s, maybe 150 as far as targets. Like, considering the consolidation of that offense, that's where I have the concerns on Laporta and why I have to unless he spikes like 12 plus touchdowns, which maybe he does, the target volume and just splitting hairs in that way, that's the only reason I don't have Sammy Ballgame at tight end 1.
I'm not putting him in this range of tight end 1, but the one guy, by the way, who we didn't mention, who I feel like I might regret is Dalton Kincaid. I think of the guys outside tier 1, he's the one that I'm most looking at as the guy who could make that leap into a year from now. We're talking about him as a tight end 1. I'm much less confident about that than I am the guys like McBride and the names we've already mentioned. But I just wanted to at least throw Kincaid out there as somebody that if I'm missing out on tier 1, he is my top choice in tier 2 by a decent amount. I really like Kincaid this year. All right, last big fantasy question here ahead of the season. And I had to talk about Derrick Henry because I've talked about him all season. He is 30 years old. I'm throwing some cold water on it, though, and that's kind of in the question, is I want to ask, he's 30 years old. There's no discount on him in drafts, though. The situation looks awesome, but running backs who are not only this old, but who are also moving to new teams, just historically, that profile often disappoints. So are we, and you could say, is Worm out over his skis with my Derrick Henry love this season? Fitz, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's the big question. I don't know if I can answer it definitively. So Derrick Henry is such a unique physical specimen that it's entirely possible he's going to be an age outlier, but not entirely out of the question that he does tumble over the age cliff unexpectedly and leaves people like you, Worm, holding the bag. Eddie George was a big physical running back like Derrick Henry who handled mammoth workloads. He did have a 1,000-yard rushing season at age 30, but he went over the cliff at age 31 and pretty much immediately retired after that. So, like, using Eddie as an example, maybe Derrick Henry is getting kind of close here. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible, and I don't think that's, as you said, Worm, I don't think it's been baked in the price at all. I think people are just kind of blithely forging ahead with Derrick Henry, anticipating zero age-related drop-off whatsoever. And I don't know if that's the right move.
Early in the summer, I think you were getting at least a slight discount. Like, I was seeing him a lot in more like the third rounds, even back end of the third rounds, even early fourth in a couple of very, very early drafts. Now, like, he's just not getting out of the second round in most leagues. And again, I get it. Like, I've said before, like, if you guarantee me 17 games, I think he scores closer to 20 touchdowns this season than 10. The Ravens do not want to run with Lamar when they're in close, but they want to be a running team. I just think every time they're inside the 8-yard line, you're going to see multiple carries by Derrick Henry. And I don't care that I care that the offensive line, there are question marks. I don't care enough to stay away from a guy who's played behind poor offensive lines before and still been very good. And also Lamar kind of like single-handedly creates good open running lanes and creates almost like a good offensive line for you because of the threat that he is, even when they don't run with him up close. So, like, again, like, I've made the case plenty of times. I love Derrick Henry this year. I loved him even more when he was going around later. But again, the profile is such that you would think maybe it doesn't work out. I actually said this in one of our recent kind of collaborations on the site, is it would require Derrick Henry to be an outlier to live up to this billing this year. But what has Derrick Henry been his whole career, if not an outlier? So I'm just willing to buy in on a guy who's that much of a freak of nature. Debro, Derrick Henry, I know you kind of give me a hard time about it, but for a lot of this time, you've been right, with that bandwagon and betting him double-digit touchdowns and all that stuff.
I'm going to continue to make the bet that a total mutant, a guy that's, you throw this around there and a lot of times I'm kidding and stuff like that, but he truly is just freaking built different, dude. Like, I don't care about the age. Like, if you look at him in a vacuum and say, okay, what is he doing on a per snap basis last year? He was still 9th in explosive run rate and 11th in yards after contact per attempt. It's still elite numbers. And now you put him in an offense that actually can score points. And I think if there's any way that he disappoints, this is not a Derrick Henry problem. This would be a Baltimore offensive line problem, not a Derrick Henry issue. I think he can still absolutely just pile drive Father Time into the abyss for at least one more season. So I have no qualms about Derrick Henry being my RB1 on any team.
By the way, I will mention on the offensive line, I've had a lot of faith in the infrastructure, just organizationally, the way this team they kind of always have question marks along the line, and then they always just come out and are at least average, if not very good. I think a lot of that in the last half dozen years has been their offensive line coach, Joe D, who did just very tragically pass away. Earlier, I guess it was last week at this point from when we're releasing the show, but very, very sad. And obviously, like, first top of the mind is the impact on his loved ones and his family and the people who knew him. And by all accounts was just this amazing, amazing guy in addition to being an awesome coach. But, aside from all the important stuff about what it means for his family, I do think it hurts the offensive line in Baltimore too. So I have a little bit less faith in the O-line than I did even with the question marks at the beginning of the season. Having said that, I hear some people say, like, they're starting a second-year, 7th-round pick. Andrew Voorhees was only a 7th-round pick because of the injury. He was like a day 2 draft pick when he was coming out of USC. Like, there's more talent on this line than I think it's being given credit for. I definitely still get the question marks, though, and I have a little bit more without Joe D coaching that offensive line anymore. Again, thinking about his family first and foremost.
Yep. My biggest questions, and just to be a little more transparent, like my big questions about the offensive line is not the interior. My big question is the tackle play. Like, can Rosengarten hit the ground running? Can Ronnie Stanley stay healthy? That's the biggest two questions on that offensive line for me, not the interior.
Patrick McCarry is a really good backup swing tackle, so he could fill in too if like Rosengarten isn't ready. Tyler Linderbaum needs to be healthy. That to me is like the big one. Where if they don't have him,
I'm assuming health
everything.
for Linderbaum.
Assuming health for him, which
right
with
now,
the way they've talked about it, he should be okay.
Yeah,
but
agreed.
He hasn't played much of this August, so if he's healthy, I feel a lot better about that. Let's actually use this moment talking about Derrick Henry to transition to the guys we are all in on in 2024. And I will start with myself because my running back is Derrick Henry. I've made it very clear throughout this season. And by the way, for this segment, this can be guys in any range of the draft. It can be first-round picks. Like, this is just the guy you want to come away from. Or it can be guys going, deep sleepers, just whatever. We're each going to pick 3 names that these are our guys. We are absolutely all in on them. We are staking our claim. We are planting our flag. We do not want to come away with drafts without these guys. If you're in a salary cap draft, we will spend up to make sure we have these guys on the roster. Mm-hmm. They are the guys that we are really planting our flags on. So we're not going to go too long on each of them because you guys have heard us talk about these names throughout the offseason, but we really just wanted the opportunity to kind of, like I said, really plant our flags and say, these are kind of our 3 guys. And for me, at running back, I had to pick Derrick Henry because I've been on him from the beginning. I would have been on him even if he wasn't in Baltimore, but the fact that he is obviously helps a little bit. But it also helps him. Like, I think the situation just with him in the backfield with Lamar is tremendous. So I asked that question, in the previous segment. I am going to go out over my skis on him. I want Derrick Henry in every draft that I can get him, and I want to enjoy those touchdowns. Fitz, who is your running back that you're all in on?
Chase Brown. I think you've heard me talk about him ad nauseum all off season, Worm. So it's a bet on Chase Brown, and it's a bet against Zach Moss. I still think there's this mass psychosis with Zach Moss based on his splendid 4-game start to last season when Jonathan Taylor was on IR, and then in Jonathan Taylor's first game back when Moss had a 3-touchdown game against the Titans. But otherwise, there were 3 seasons in Buffalo where Devin Singletary just beat out Zach Moss and out-touched him and out-snapped him dramatically. 3 straight seasons, and then in the middle of the 3rd season, they just got rid of Zach Moss. And by the way, after week 6, from week 6 on last year, Zach Moss averaged 3.6 yards per carry. Chase Brown is younger, faster, and a better pass catcher.
D-Bro, you did not submit a running back because you had to go
No,
off
of course
the board.
I had to sidestep the rules that you put out there.
So give me your wide receiver.
It's Drake London. I mean, anybody listening to this program the entire offseason knows that Drake London's going to the moon. So, pack your bags. Let's ride together.
Fitz, who's your wide receiver?
Terry McLaurin. He has had 4 straight seasons of 77 or more catches and 1,000+ yards, but he's lagged in touchdowns, only 25 in 80 career games. Maybe it's because the list of quarterbacks with whom he has played at least 2 games is Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, late career Alex Smith, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and Sam Howell, and Jacoby Brissett. Now that Jayden Daniels is there, the touchdown outlook looks a lot brighter.
Fitz, I do not understand why Terry McLaurin has his lowest ADP since his rookie season. I mean, I've been shouting it from the rooftops, it feels like, all summer. Best quarterback.
People have been wrong on that the entire offseason, and they remain wrong on that.
He would have been my pick. I didn't want to pick the same one as Fitz, so I let Fitz have McLaurin. But for the record, he would have been my pick. I think he's a top 18 receiver this year. So I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs. We talked about it a bit earlier. I'm betting on the chemistry that I think he will have with Caleb Williams. I'm betting on, again, this guy was right there with Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. as a draft prospect, and he's paired with a very good quarterback, we think. I'm just not... If there's an injury, he will be a top 24 receiver every week, I think, if Moore or Keenan Allen goes down. And even if there's not, I could see him getting the type of usage where he just shouldn't be going in the mid to late 30s at the position. So Rome Odunze is a guy that I really want to be in on this year. D-Bro, give us your quarterback.
I'm gonna pause just for a second and let the people listening to this show take a guess. Who do you think I'm going to bring?
Everybody listening, we'll give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count.
Exactly. You only need 1. I mean, come on. My QB1 in the draft process, and I've said it time and time again. I said this at the beginning of the draft season. If he starts all the games, he's going to be a top 12 quarterback. Lock it in. it's happening. Jayden Daniels. I'm all in, man. I'm either going to make a lot of quiche in best ball this year with all the Jayden Daniels, or I might be taking out a second mortgage and hitting y'all up for some donations after this season.
Now, Fitz, you did also pick Jayden Daniels, but you gave another name to not repeat.
Yeah, I didn't want to parrot Debro, and I also thought it might be bad juju to take 2 Washington Commanders as my must-have guys. So let's pivot to Jordan Love.
So you fell on back on Packer fandom.
Yes, I did. And
but it's a good call. I'm giving you crap, but it's a good call.
Yeah, I mean, over his last 8 starts of the 2023 regular season, Love averaged 268.8 passing yards per game with 18 touchdown passes, 1 interception, a 70.3% completion rating, and 7.7 yards per attempt. All really good numbers. Then went out and just picked his teeth with the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, Love adds a little bit of value as a runner, and it is really nice that he's got this great young core of pass catchers, and he also has one of the best play callers in the league with Matt LaFleur. So I think all things are kind of pointing up for Jordan Love this year.
You guys would be proud of me. We do this whole team league with Fantasy Pros every year, which is really fun. You have a budget and you bid on just teams as a whole. So there's only 32, opportunities to bid, and you just get every player on that, and then it plays out like a regular fantasy team. And this year I came away with 3 teams. I came away with, it's a super flex, by the way. I got the Packers, the Commanders, and the Eagles. So I came away with Jordan Love, Jayden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts. I'm feeling good about that squad. One of the other teams that I wanted to get but didn't have enough budget for is the Cardinals. And my quarterback is Kyler Murray. I think he's going to be really good this year. I love the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. You guys know I really love Trey McBride. I think one of the questions I almost asked you guys and didn't during kind of the previous segment was, who is that offense this year that everybody ends up being underrated? Like, you would just want to invest in this offense and ends up being a right decision. And to me, the Cardinals are one of those options. And what really helps is I think it's very clear who the guys are that are going to get the fantasy points. It's going to be Kyler Murray. It's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. It's going to be Trey McBride. And then it's going to be James Conner unless Trey Benson takes over the backfield. But I want as many of those 4 at their respective costs, because I think they're all very reasonable values, except for maybe Harrison, but I'm still willing to pay that price. I want to get as many of those guys as possible. So Kyler Murray is my quarterback here at cost that I really am all in on. Debra, who is your tight end, speaking of?
So the reason that I also wanted to pivot away from running back, because I feel like we have to max out at some point about the number of Commanders that we can bring up on one show. So I didn't want to mention Brian Robinson Jr. on this, although he was in consideration for the list. But again, pointing back to the theme of this episode, kind of just quietly rumbling underneath the surface, people can go back and listen to this entire episode and understand that and a point that you just made, Worm, we are really high on the Falcons offense, the Commanders, and the Green Bay Packers, and as well as the Arizona Cardinals. So the last guy I got to bring up here is tight end Trey McBride. Flag planting it all day. My tight end 1 overall. But the bigger point is invest in those 4 offenses, because I think they are being underrated, or they're just going to smash and you need to pay up.
Long episode, but super fun. Hopefully the weekly Friday episodes are a little bit shorter than this one, but we're entering the season. There's a lot to hit on. We'll do our best. So thank you everybody for tuning in this week. And the season is here. I mean, it feels like it's in the future. It's in the future. It's in the future. All of a sudden, it's in the present. I mean, we're right here. So really excited. We're very excited to have everybody come along for the ride this whole season. And I'm excited to chat with you two every Friday here for the next several months. So thank you everybody for tuning in. For Debro and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli, and we'll see you again later this week.